She came home with the smell of someone else's cologne on her. That's how it starts. That's the first thing I noticed. It wasn't mine. I don't wear cologne. Haven't for years. Karen hated the stuff, said it gave her a headache, said it reminded her of sleazy guys who hit on women at bars, the kind who try too hard and always smell like they dipped themselves in a bottle of something cheap. So imagine my surprise when she walked through the door around 9:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, claiming she was late from her teen dinner, and as she leaned down to give me a distracted kiss, that scent hit me. Sharp, masculine, fresh, something expensive and deliberate. I froze for a second, letting her pass behind me while I sat on the couch, beer in hand. Our unfinished show paused on the TV. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and didn't care. Either way, she just dropped her purse on the dining table, kicked off her heels, and started talking about how awful the service was at whatever restaurant she claimed they'd gone to. I didn't say anything right then. I let her ramble, nodding at the right moments while my stomach twisted. She poured herself a glass of wine like nothing happened, leaned against the kitchen counter, and asked if the kids had gone to bed okay. I said yeah, everything was fine. Told her Emily had fallen asleep halfway through her book again, and that Josh was probably pretending to be asleep so he could read under the covers. She laughed like she cared, but her eyes didn't light up. They used to. She looked tired, like something was draining her from the inside out. But I knew it wasn't exhaustion, not from work, anyway. The next morning, I noticed she had forgotten something rare for her, her gym bag. It was still by the door, but her sneakers were missing. That wouldn't have been weird if she didn't tell me later that day she was going straight from the gym to a client meeting. I said nothing, just nodded again like I always do, but my thoughts started connecting in a way that made me sick. I had no solid proof, just little things that added up wrong. Her stories didn't line up. Her energy was off. Her warmth had cooled to something mechanical, polite at best, and sometimes not even that. Then it happened. The thing that shattered any illusion I still had. I wasn't even looking for it. I had taken the day off work because of a stomach bug, at least that's what I told her. Truth was, I needed a break. A mental one. So I stayed home, dropped the kids off at school like usual, then came back and crawled into bed, fully intending to spend the day watching movies and pretending my life was still normal. Around 11 a.m., I heard the front door. I thought maybe she'd forgotten something again. Keys, a charger, some file for work. But instead of her usual rushed steps or curses under her breath when she forgot something, I heard laughter. A man's laughter. Deep, relaxed, familiar in a way that turned my blood cold. I didn't move at first. I just lay there, heart thumping in my chest so loud it felt like it echoed off the walls. Then I heard her voice, quiet, playful, the way she used to sound with me years ago. That made me move. I got up, barefoot, careful with every step, and crept toward the stairs, trying to stay out of sight. They didn't notice me. They were in the kitchen. He was sitting on one of the stools at the island, flipping through a notebook, sipping from the coffee mug I'd bought her last Christmas. She stood next to him, touching his arm, laughing too loud at something he said, her body language screaming comfort. Intimacy. His hand slid around her waist, and she didn't flinch. She leaned into it. I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending, she whispered. You don't have to, he said, setting down the mug. Just say the word. I gripped the banister so hard I thought I'd snap it in half. My teeth clenched, my jaw locked, but I didn't move. Not yet. I needed to see more. I needed to be sure. I needed to burn this image into my memory because once I stepped in, there was no going back. No rewinding to ignorance. No pretending anymore. She kissed him. It wasn't quick. It wasn't guilty. It was the kind of kiss that said this wasn't the first time. And it sure as hell wouldn't be the last. I backed up, slowly, and went back to the bedroom. I didn't confront her then. I didn't storm downstairs and throw them both out. I lay down, stared at the ceiling, and listened to my marriage die one laugh, one kiss, one lie at a time. I stayed in bed the rest of that day, pretending I was asleep when she came up later smelling like coffee and lies. She asked how I was feeling, stood at the doorway like someone checking in on a neighbor, not a husband, and I told her it was just a stomach bug, and I didn't want to get her sick. She nodded, didn't come close, didn't even pretend to care beyond that one question. She said she'd sleep in the guest room, just in case, and I agreed without looking at her. I stared at the same crack in the ceiling for hours after that, listening to her move around the house, waiting to hear her on the phone with him, but she didn't make a sound. She had learned to be careful. That was the worst part. She wasn't reckless. This wasn't some stupid mistake or moment of weakness. She had planned it all. She was calm. She was composed. And that told me more than any confrontation ever could. The next morning, I woke up early. I made breakfast for the kids like always, packed their lunches, kissed them on the head, and sent them off to school. Karen came down late, dressed in something casual but clearly picked out with purpose, the kind of outfit that said she wanted to look effortless. She poured herself coffee, barely glanced at me, and said she had a client meeting around noon. I told her I might work from a cafe today, needed some fresh air. She barely responded, said something about remembering to take my meds, and walked out the door without even asking if I was feeling better. That was when I knew I could do what I was about to do without a second thought. I waited 10 minutes, grabbed my jacket, and left. I didn't follow her car. I didn't even go in the same direction. I already knew where she was going. I'd seen the notebook the guy was flipping through, something from a local design firm. Karen had told me months ago she was working with them on a side project, helping a friend rebrand her small business. At the time, I didn't care. Now, I cared a lot. I drove across town and parked near the office. I waited in my car with the engine off, watching as people went in and out. Around 11:30, she pulled up. She wasn't in a hurry. She wasn't nervous. She looked like she belonged there. She didn't go in right away. She waited in her car for a few minutes, texting someone. Then he came out. Same guy from the kitchen. I recognized the smug look immediately. He slid into the passenger seat like he'd done it before, and after a few seconds, they drove off together. I followed. Not close enough to be noticed, just enough to see where they were going. They didn't go far. A hotel near the edge of town, business class, nothing fancy, but quiet. Hidden enough. I parked 2 blocks away and sat there, breathing slowly, thinking about what to do next. I didn't want to kick the door in or start yelling in the lobby. That's not who I am. But I wasn't going to do nothing. So I waited an hour. Then I walked into the hotel like I belonged there, headed for the front desk, and gave the woman behind the counter my most tired, frustrated husband face. I told her I was supposed to meet my wife, but I forgot the room number and my phone had died. I gave her Karen's name, calmly, like someone just trying to get through the day. She didn't even blink. She looked it up, told me the room number, and smiled like she was doing me a favor. I thanked her and took the elevator up to the 3rd floor. I didn't go in. I didn't even knock. I stood there for a long time, looking at the number on the door, listening for sounds, hearing nothing. I could have walked away. I could have left it there and figured out a plan with just the knowledge I already had. But I needed something real. I needed her to see me. I knocked twice, stepped back, and waited. A few seconds later, the door opened, just a crack. She looked out, expecting him, probably, and when she saw me, her face dropped. Not in shock. In frustration. "James, what are you doing here?" she asked, like I'd forgotten to take the trash out or left the milk on the counter. "I followed you," I said, staring straight at her, letting the silence stretch. "You weren't at a meeting." Her eyes flicked behind her, and I heard movement inside. Then she stepped out into the hallway, pulling the door shut behind her. "You're being ridiculous," she said, lowering her voice. "This isn't what it looks like." "Then open the door," I said. "No," she snapped. "You have no right." "You're my wife," I said. "I have every right." She didn't say anything. Her hands were shaking now. Not from fear. From anger. "I told you, I needed space," she said finally. "I needed something that wasn't this." "Say it," I told her. "Say what this is." She looked away. "Say it, Karen." "I'm sleeping with him," she said. "There. Are you happy now?" "No," I said. "But I'm done pretending." I turned and walked down the hallway, leaving her standing there in silence. And as I reached the elevator, I heard the door close behind me. Not slammed. Just shut. Like it had all been decided already. I didn't go home right away. I needed to cool down, to stop my hands from shaking and my head from spinning. I drove around for nearly an hour, not even thinking about where I was going, just letting the streets blur past while I gripped the wheel tighter than I should have. The image of her standing in that hallway kept repeating in my head, how casually she admitted it, how she didn't flinch when she said the words. "I'm sleeping with him." Not even an ounce of guilt in her voice. Just fatigue, like she was tired of hiding it and was glad to finally have it out in the open. And that was the part that kept punching me in the stomach. She wasn't sorry. By the time I pulled into the driveway, it was already dark. The kids were home. I could see the light from Josh's room upstairs and the faint blue glow of the TV from the living room. I walked in quietly, nodded at Emily, who was curled up on the couch with a blanket and her tablet, and gave her a half smile when she asked if I was feeling better. I said I was just tired, that I needed a shower and maybe some sleep. I didn't see Karen anywhere. She probably wasn't home yet. Or maybe she was hiding in the guest room again. Either way, I didn't care. Not tonight. I waited until the kids were in bed, until the house was quiet and still, and then I knocked on the door to the guest room. No answer at first. I knocked again, harder this time. "What?" she said from the other side, flat and uninterested. "We need to talk," I said. She opened the door slowly, arms crossed, still wearing the same clothes from earlier, like she hadn't bothered to change. She stepped aside and let me in. I sat on the edge of the bed. She stayed standing, leaning against the dresser like this was a performance she had rehearsed. "You lied," I said. "For months." She sighed like it was an inconvenience. "I didn't lie," she said. "I just didn't tell you." "That's not better," I said. "That's worse." "I tried," she said. "I tried to tell you. I tried to have conversations. You didn't want to hear them. You tried to tell me by sneaking around behind my back?" I asked, looking up at her. "You tried to tell me by fucking someone else in a hotel while I was taking care of your children?" "Our children," she snapped. "Not to him they're not," I said. She flinched a little at that, but she didn't break. She stayed quiet, breathing slowly, eyes locked on mine like we were staring each other down in some kind of contest. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want to scream or throw things. I just wanted answers. Real ones. "How long?" I asked. She hesitated. 3 months, she said. 3 months, I repeated, trying to calculate how many lies that added up to. How many fake meetings? How many missed dinners? How many nights she came home and kissed our kids goodnight with someone else still on her lips? "Why him?" I asked. "What is it about him that made you decide this was worth destroying everything?" She laughed. Not loudly. Not mockingly. Just a tired, humorless sound. "It wasn't about him," she said. "It was about me. I didn't feel like a person anymore. I felt like a function. A wife. A mom. A checklist of responsibilities. I felt like I disappeared." "So disappearing into a stranger's bed helped you feel alive?" I asked. "It helped me feel like someone saw me," she said. "Like I was interesting. Like I mattered." "And I didn't make you feel that way?" I asked, even though I already knew what she'd say. "No," she said. "Not for a long time." I stood up then, walked past her, and stood at the window, trying to focus on something, anything, outside that would stop the spinning in my chest. I thought of every night I made dinner, every morning I packed the kids' lunches, every holiday I stayed up late wrapping gifts, every small moment I thought I was being a good husband, a good father, a good man. "You could have just told me," I said. "I tried," she said again. "No," I said, turning to face her. "You didn't. You didn't try. You just gave up and went looking for someone who would make you feel better, because it was easier than trying to fix what was broken." "You think everything can be fixed?" she asked. "You think if we just had one more conversation or one more date night it would have changed anything?" "I think we owed it to each other to try," I said. "I think we owed it to our kids, to the years we spent building a life together. I think you owed me honesty, at the very least." She sat down on the bed then, head in her hands, but still no tears. Just silence. I waited for something, an apology, an explanation, some kind of emotion, but there was nothing. "I want you out of this house," I said finally. She looked up, startled. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked. "I don't care," I said. "You can go to him. You can get a hotel. You can sleep in your car. But you're not sleeping under this roof again. Not after this. You can't make that decision alone," she said. "This is my house too. I can and I will," I said. "Because the kids are staying here. And I'm not letting them live one more day in a house where one parent thinks betrayal is something you can explain away." She opened her mouth like she was going to argue, then shut it. She didn't fight me. She didn't scream. She didn't even ask for another night. She just stood up, walked to the closet, and started pulling her things together. I didn't wait for her to leave. I took the kids out for breakfast the next morning, told them we were having a special day, just the three of us. Emily picked the diner. She always picked the same place, mostly because of the pancakes shaped like cartoon characters and the waitress who called her sweetheart. Josh didn't care as long as there was bacon. I sat there across from them, sipping bad coffee, watching them eat like everything was normal, and I realized how many times I must have looked like that to Karen while she was lying to me. Focused, calm, pretending things were fine while something inside was tearing apart. I kept wondering if the kids noticed. If they picked up on the way her voice changed when she said she had to work late or how she avoided looking me in the eye at dinner. Maybe they thought we were just tired. Maybe they thought that's what marriage looked like after a while. I wanted to grab them right there, tell them it's not supposed to feel like that, that love doesn't disappear unless you let it. But instead I just smiled, paid the bill, and took them to the park. When we got home later that afternoon, her car was gone. The guest room was empty. No note. No message. Nothing. Like she had just evaporated. I walked through the house checking everything, even though I didn't know what I was checking for. Maybe I expected something dramatic, some final insult, some broken picture frame or cruel message scrawled on the bathroom mirror. But there was nothing. She had just left. I stood in our bedroom and looked at the closet, now half empty, and I felt this strange sense of relief. Like I could breathe again without wondering what lie she was going to tell me next. I didn't waste time. That night after the kids went to bed, I opened my laptop and started making a list. Not a list of things to say or do emotionally, just logistics. Bank accounts, utilities, schools, schedules. I was taking my life back piece by piece, and I wasn't going to let her make any more decisions for me. I pulled up my emails and started contacting lawyers. I wanted someone who'd seen cases like this before. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted action. Within 2 days, I had an appointment set up, and I made sure to bring everything: financial statements, copies of our mortgage, even a printed calendar I marked with every time she'd claimed to be working late for the past 3 months. I wasn't going to walk into this blind. I was going to walk in ready. The lawyer was a woman named Dana, maybe mid-40s, sharp as hell, and exactly the kind of person I needed. She didn't give me any speeches about healing or moving on. She asked questions, took notes, and told me what we needed to do. She explained how custody would work, how property could be divided, what kind of mess it might turn into if Karen decided to fight dirty. I told her I wanted full custody, not because I wanted to punish Karen, but because I didn't trust her anymore, and I wasn't about to have my kids used as pawns in whatever new fantasy she was chasing with her designer boyfriend. Dana nodded, said we'd build the case around stability and consistency, and that I had the upper hand as long as I stayed calm and didn't lose focus. I didn't contact Karen for 3 days. Not a single call, not a message. I didn't even tell her I had a lawyer. I let the silence do the talking. On the 4th day, she showed up at the door around 8 in the evening. The kids were already upstairs, brushing their teeth. She knocked once and then opened the door without waiting. I was in the kitchen, finishing the dishes. She stood there awkwardly, holding a small bag, like she was trying to look casual, like she hadn't shattered our life with her selfishness. I just came to pick up a few more things, she said, not looking at me. I didn't say anything. I dried my hands, leaned against the counter, and watched her. She walked past me, went to the bedroom, and came out 10 minutes later with a few books and a couple of shirts. Then she stood by the door like she was waiting for something. Are you going to say anything? She asked. What do you want me to say? I replied. You left. I didn't leave the kids, she said. I just needed space. You had space for 3 months in another man's bed, I said. Now you want sympathy? She shook her head like I was being unreasonable. I made a mistake, she said. But we can't erase everything we've been through. We're not erasing it, I said. We're ending it. I don't want a divorce, she said. I want to work on it. You didn't want to work on it when you were sneaking around, I said. You wanted easy. You wanted fun. You wanted to feel special without earning it. And now that it's falling apart, you want to come back and pretend like there's still a path forward. I still love you, she said. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. No, you don't, I said. You love that I was always there. That I took care of everything while you played your little game. You love having someone stable to come back to when it all goes wrong. She didn't answer. She just stood there, blinking hard, probably expecting me to say something kind to soften the blow. But I wasn't that man anymore. I'm filing for divorce, I said. I have a lawyer. You'll be getting the papers soon. She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, then closed it again. She picked up her bag and walked out without another word. I thought after serving the papers she'd back off, disappear, move on with the man she threw everything away for. But instead, she did the one thing I wasn't ready for. She started acting like a mother again. She showed up unannounced 2 days after getting the documents, not to scream or beg or argue, but to see the kids. I was sitting in the living room when I heard the knock. Emily answered it, and when she saw her mom, she froze. Karen stepped in, hugged her tight, and called out for Josh like this was any regular visit. I didn't stop her. I just sat there and watched as she dropped into old rhythms like nothing had changed. She brought snacks, sat at the kitchen table, asked about school, and helped Emily with her homework like she hadn't walked out a week earlier. The kids didn't ask questions. They missed her, and I couldn't blame them for that. But I could blame her for pretending she could just step in and out whenever she wanted without explaining a damn thing. When they went to bed, she stayed behind. I walked into the kitchen and found her cleaning up, loading the dishwasher like she used to. She saw me standing there and didn't even flinch. "You're not going to say anything?" she asked. "What do you want me to say?" I replied. "You've already made your choices." "I haven't seen them in days," she said. "I'm still their mother. And that's why I didn't throw you out in front of them," I said. "But you don't get to play house after what you did." "I'm not playing anything," she said. "I'm trying to figure out how to be in their lives without making this worse." "Then stop pretending we're still a family," I said. "You want to see them? Fine. But don't walk in here like nothing happened. Don't clean my dishes. Don't try to act like we're on pause instead of over." She turned off the water and leaned against the sink. "I was confused," she said. "Everything felt like it was closing in, and I needed something that didn't feel like routine." "You don't cheat on your family because you're bored," I said. "You don't destroy your marriage because you want excitement." "I didn't mean to destroy it," she said. "I just didn't know how else to feel like myself again." "You want to feel like yourself?" I said. "Then own up to what you did. Tell your kids the truth. Tell them why their mom walked out on their dad and started sleeping with someone else. See how they react when you stop hiding behind this fake regret." "I'm not telling them," she said, instantly defensive. "They're too young to understand." "No," I said. "They're old enough to see the consequences. They don't need every detail, but they deserve the truth. Or would you rather they grow up thinking I pushed you out without reason?" "I'm their mother," she repeated, like that was enough to erase everything. "And I'm their father," I said. "And I'm the one who stayed." She picked up her purse, stepped toward the door, and paused. "I didn't think you'd hate me this much," she said quietly. "I don't hate you," I said. "I just don't recognize you." After that night, she started calling instead of showing up. She asked to take the kids out on weekends, and I agreed, but only if she picked them up and brought them back on time. I wasn't letting her dictate anything anymore. She wanted them Saturday morning? Fine. She had them back by Sunday night. She tried pushing the boundaries once, keeping them an extra night without asking. I showed up at her apartment Monday morning with a firm knock on her door, already dialing my lawyer. "I didn't know it would be a problem," she said, opening the door with her hair still wet and her voice too casual. "You don't get to decide what's a problem anymore," I told her. "If you want to share custody, follow the schedule. You screw around with that again, and I'll make sure you see them less." "You think you're the better parent now?" she asked, stepping back. "I don't need to think it," I said. "I've been the one doing everything while you've been figuring out who you are in someone else's bed." Josh walked up behind her then, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Hey, Dad," he said, like none of it mattered. "Hey, buddy," I said, softening my tone. "You ready to go?" He nodded, and Karen didn't say anything else. She didn't try to hug me. She didn't even look me in the eye. Driving home, Josh told me about a movie he watched over the weekend, completely unaware of how close his mom and I had come to turning the morning into another war. That's what I hated the most, how normal the kids tried to act, how much they had started adjusting to this mess like it was just another part of growing up. Later that week, she called again, this time to ask if we could talk without the kids around. I said yes, mostly out of curiosity. She came over Thursday night, sat on the couch like she was scared to touch anything. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, "about how things ended, about what I did." I didn't respond. I just watched her. "I don't want a custody battle," she said. "I want us to figure out a way to do this without ruining each other." "We already ruined each other," I said. "Now we're just dealing with the cleanup." "I want to apologize," she said. "Not because I think it changes anything, just because I never really said it." I waited. "I'm sorry," she said. "For everything." It didn't hit like I thought it would. It didn't feel like closure. It just felt like words that came too late. After her apology, she sat there waiting, probably hoping I'd offer something back, maybe forgiveness or some sign that we could still find a way to be civil. But I had nothing to give her, not anymore. I nodded, not to dismiss her, but because I needed her to understand that nothing she said would undo the damage. We weren't going to be friends. We weren't going to co-parent like those people you see on social media smiling at birthday parties and calling each other by their first names like nothing ever happened. We were just going to survive this the way people do when they've been pushed too far to care about what it used to be. I stood up and told her it was time to go. She didn't argue, didn't ask to stay and talk more. She just picked up her purse and walked to the door. Before she stepped out, she looked back. "I know you won't believe this," she said, "but I never wanted to hurt you." "I believe you didn't think about me at all," I said. She left without another word, and that was the last real conversation we had. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks later. She didn't contest anything. She agreed to the custody schedule, didn't argue over the house, didn't even ask for anything beyond what was legally required. It was as if once the truth was out, she didn't have the energy to fight anymore. The man she left me for? I heard from someone who worked near his office that he'd gone quiet too. Rumor was he got transferred out of state. I didn't ask her about it, and she never brought him up again. I figured they ended the same way they started, quiet, dishonest, and forgettable. The house felt different after the papers were signed. I rearranged the furniture, painted the bedroom, changed every little thing that reminded me of her routines. It wasn't about starting over. It was about reclaiming something. The kids noticed the changes but didn't say much. They were adapting the way kids do when they don't have a choice. Emily asked once if Mom was going to come back and live with us. I told her no, and when she asked why, I said because some things can't be fixed no matter how much you want them to be. She didn't cry, didn't push the question. She just nodded and went back to her book. Josh took longer to understand. He had more questions. He asked if I still loved Mom, if I was mad at her forever, if I was going to find someone new. I told him I loved the version of her that used to care about us, that I wasn't mad all the time, and that I didn't know what came next. He asked if that meant maybe I'd forgive her one day. I told him that forgiving someone doesn't mean you let them back in, and he seemed to understand more than I expected. One night, about a month after the divorce, Karen called. She said she wanted to meet somewhere neutral to talk. No kids, no drama. Just a conversation. I agreed because I needed to hear what she thought was so important after everything had already ended. We met at a small coffee place downtown, the kind of place we used to go to before we had kids. She was already sitting at a corner table when I walked in, looking nervous, tapping her finger on the lid of her coffee cup. I wasn't sure if you'd come, she said. I wanted to know what this was about, I said, sitting down. I'm moving, she said. Not far, just across town. It's cheaper, and I need to get away from all the reminders. That's fine, I said. As long as the kids know where to find you. They'll know, she said. I just thought you should hear it from me. We sat in silence for a bit. People around us were chatting, working on laptops, living in their own little worlds. It was strange to be sitting there with her like this, both of us reduced to polite updates about logistics and locations. I've been going to therapy, she said, trying to figure out how I ended up here. I already figured that out for you, I said. I'm not asking for anything, she said. I just wanted to say that I know what I lost. And I'm sorry I realized it too late. I hope you mean that, I said. I do, she said. And I hope you find someone who doesn't make you feel invisible. I'm not looking for anyone, I said. I'm focusing on what matters. She nodded, finished her drink, and stood up. Take care of yourself, James, she said. You too, I said. And that was it. She left. I sat there for a while, thinking about everything that had happened in just a few short weeks. The betrayal, the arguments, the decisions, the nights lying awake wondering how the person I shared everything with could turn into someone I barely recognized. I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired, but not broken. I had my kids, my home, my quiet routines. I had the truth, and I had the freedom to rebuild without pretending things were fine when they weren't. The hardest part wasn't losing her. It was accepting that she'd been gone long before I noticed. But now, finally, I could breathe without wondering when the next lie would come. That was enough for me. That was the real ending. And I didn't need anything more.